Hey again, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Discussions of Darkness. This week I wanted to talk about a faction that most of us likely haven't come across no matter how often we play these games, because despite being from one of the better-known books in the Chronicles setting, it seems not a lot of us have actually played Hunter the Vigil. Most of us seem to keep Hunters on a standby in the event that our players go too far and make themselves too obvious, and we use them as a threat or as an antagonist. But there are some aspects of this game that are a lot of fun on their own, and it's why I'd highly recommend playing it. And these days, there's a certain catharsis to be had for folks who want to step into a world that is similar to but different from our own. Because a lot of the time I have found when you try to get people to play a horror game, or when you try to get people to play a World or Chronicles of Darkness game, particularly when events like today are happening, they're too tired, they're too burnt out, they want escapism from the chaos that's going on around them. They don't want to see it echoed and reflected in where they're going to get away from all of those stresses. And I understand that. However, with that said, I do really think that more of us, particularly these days, should really consider a game either heavily featuring or centered around the plots of the Loyalists of Thule. And folks who are fans of comic books or of alternate history may be very familiar with that name, particularly if you enjoy the films or comics about Hellboy. However, the Thule Society was an actual thing in Germany, started in 1918 and disbanded in the early 1920s, and it was a German occult society. To give very broad strokes about history, so there's a lot of time and energy dedicated to this particular thing, but I'm going to gloss it over for folks who don't want an entire video essay on the history of German occultism and its place in the spiritualist movement. But why this organization is so famous is that lots of their roster was sort of a who's who of early sympathizers for what would eventually become the Nazi Party, including Adolf Hitler. And in the game, as in history, the Thule Society disbanded before the Nazis rose to power, but this is where our alternate history takes over and where things get a little interesting. Because the Thule Society, in reality, also sort of got broken up and went its own way. But in Hunter, the Loyalists continued trying to find proof of both the ancient nation of Thule and the Aryan peoples who lived within them. And just like in our reality, they were eventually shown that the thing that they had been chasing, the beliefs they had, were wrong. There was no ancient Thule. There was no perfect people that the Germans had seeded society from. It was all just wishful thinking and reading things between the lines that were not there, and people desperate to seem that they had found some great and ancient truth. But the Loyalists then had to turn around and face the horrors of what their beliefs and what had once been purely academic pursuits had led to. And all of them said, with their full chest, never again. And unlike a lot of us, they meant it. Which is where we get into the interesting potential that a game featuring the Loyalists of Thule has, both as a Hunter game and as a bit of catharsis from our reality at the moment. Because the purpose of Hunter the Vigil is that individuals have become aware of the supernatural in whatever forms that it takes, and they have decided that they are going to be that line in the sand between those things that go bump in the night and normal people just trying to live their lives. So whether it's werewolves who are running wild through the countryside and causing havoc, whether it's vampires who are doing their deals in the dark of the night, whether it's, changelings just doing their best to try and shake hands and steal dreams, Hunters don't want anyone to be preyed on by these, or any of the other myriad of creatures that exist out there. For folks who have read through Hunter or have heard me talk about it before, you know that there is a Build Your Own Monster Freak of the Week section where you can just make things that no other books have time for, whether you want infestations of the Walking Dead, or whether you want something a little stranger when it comes to the monsters that, show up on your table. What makes the Loyalists unusual amongst most of the factions is that they're not just out to fight the supernatural. They do not just have a beef with these creatures because they're inhuman or because they, have powers that are strange and frightening. They are out to prevent harm to humanity, specifically. And their history has shown that humans are sometimes the worst monsters out there. And that is why, for the Loyalists, the main target is not always a chupacabra who's gotten loose and is running amok in the ghetto. It's not always creatures from the deep forest that have been awoken and are lashing out at those who have trespassed on their territory. The monsters are those who are harming people, and sometimes that means they go after other humans or other human entities and organizations that are dedicated to doing what they swore would never be allowed to happen again. And this can be interesting, because this allows you to really mix those worlds of the supernatural and the mortal in ways that don't always come together in other games. Especially if you want to have members of the Thule Society, or the Loyalists of Thule as they're now known today, who are trying to stop the spread of fascism in whatever form it takes. And you could run this in a historical setting if you're of a mind to do either a game set just after World War II, where you have the Loyalists hunting down Nazi war criminals. You could have them in Spain fighting against Franco's agents, because fascism flourished there long after the Nazis had collapsed. Or if you wanted to do a more modern game, you could have them setting up in their own communities, doing everything they can to stop families from being torn apart by heavy-handed government organizations. You could have them fighting against skinhead gangs who are really trying to push their racist ideology and to actually make inroads back into pop culture and the mainstream. You could have all sorts of things, especially when you ask who it is that is supporting these fascist moves. Because as the book clearly lays out, and it makes no bones about this for folks who are wondering, it does what I have recommended for a long time. If you go back and watch the earlier videos on the channel, if you want to run games that feel, true to our reality, the worst thing you can do is to take a historical tragedy and lay it at the feet of the supernatural and claim that it wasn't humans who did this, it was monsters. Monsters can be part of it, and they might have gained from it, they might have supported it, but these evils were done by humans, and we need to make sure that humans are the ones who maintain the blame for this. And the same is true for the Loyalists of Thule and their enemies. Because those who are supporting fascism, they're going to be people. They might have collaborators in supernatural communities. There might be vampires from that time period who really wish that, the war had gone differently. There might be individuals who, they're a little too obsessed with their racial purity. They're a little too focused on theories that have been disproven, but that they want to be true. These can all be factors in the game. But at the end of the day, the Loyalists are here to make sure that people are free, people are safe, and that those evils that they once supported and that they helped rise to power in their own way, whether or not they knew what would come of their actions, never happen again. And if you're looking for a little bit of catharsis, that could go a long way these days, particularly for those of us who we're doing our best to be involved in our communities, we're trying to keep our loved ones safe, but we always feel like we should be doing more. We feel like there's something else that we should be capable of, and maybe we really want to take a certain kind of direct action, but we know that we can't or we shouldn't. And sometimes that's what these games should be for. They should be for catharsis, a wish fulfillment, and to allow us to step outside of ourselves into another kind of person. And that might be the sort of person who can go toe-to-toe with a racist street gang. It might be the kind of person who has the necessary academic background to find out the roots of the causes of our modern issues and to yank them out. It might be someone who is charismatic enough to help lead movements and to push back these terrible things that we have tried so hard for so long to stop from getting a toehold on so many people. But that's my thoughts for today. As I said, the Loyalists and their debt to society and their desire to stop anyone from being harmed by these extremely dangerous political ideologies has for no reason been on my mind lately as someone living in the Midwest in America. But I wanted to ask all of you out there before I sign off, is this something you'd like to see me talk about more for the other factions of Hunter the Vigil? Would you like to see my take on, well, original factions, if you are curious about what I would make for the game for folks to play with? Or is Hunter a game you're not really interested in? Is it a little too close to just being normal humans and you really want to play supernatural creatures, you want to have those unusual powers? Let me know in the comments what your opinion on this game is, if you've played it, and if you haven't, why haven't you yet? But, as always, if there are particular topics you want to see me cover, if there is something you feel really belongs on the channel, let me know in the comments down below, and hopefully I'll be able to get them to my publisher and come up with some fresh episodes for everyone in the future. But between now and then, remember to like, share, subscribe, go through the archive if you haven't watched all of our other videos, and if nothing else, you get to see the interesting progression from episode 1 to nearly episode 50 now, where our quality has gone up and things have changed. So, till next time, happy gaming, everyone. Thank you for staying to the end of this episode of Discussions of Darkness. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking the video and sharing it on your own social media to help boost the signal. And if you'd like to help us keep the show and channel going, don't forget to hit that subscribe button as well. If you have any questions about the topic I covered today, or if you have something you'd like to see covered in a future episode, make sure to leave it in the comments below. Lastly, please check out the link in the video description to browse all of my World and Chronicles of Darkness supplements from Ezekiel Games. So far, we've covered Changeling the Lost, Vampire the Masquerade, Mage the Awakening, and Geist the Sin Eaters, in addition to a handful of general supplements that will be useful for any game set in the World or Chronicles of Darkness settings. Thank you in advance for your support. You're the ones who help us keep the lights on, so we don't fade into the shadows.